into the work that they do. So it's really also, Sophia, about you, just what lights you up and keeps you inspired. So I'd love to just start with like, where are you zooming in from?
I am in Bushwick, New York. My studio is here. I live in Bed-Stuy, but my studio is in Bushwick.
Are you a native New Yorker?
I'm not. I'm from Florida originally, but I've been in New York about a decade, about 10 years.
What brought you to New York?
Food. I'm a chef, and I had an opportunity to work for a family here many, many years ago, 10 years ago. Or I guess maybe it was 11 years ago, actually. Darn, 11 years. I don't know how long I've been in New York, but a long time. And I never thought I could ever live in New York, but this opportunity presented itself and I took it. And so I've been in New York ever since.
You want to introduce yourself? Sorry, I skipped over that.
Yeah, no problem. No problem. Hi, Sophia. I am Julia. I'm the podcast producer, and it is such a pleasure to be speaking with you today. I so admire you. I think you're so unbelievably impressive, and I know you have an amazing story to share, and you're just amazing. It's amazing to see you on Zoom.
Thanks, dude. I'm sorry that I'm like, it's been a day. I made this most amazing pear cake earlier and I fucking dropped. Go on Instagram at it. And people are like, no, it's still salvageable. I'm like, yeah, 2 hours to make. Dropped it. And it's just like, it's been a day. It's just been one of those days, man. So
well, one of the things I love about you so much is your ethos, because you're so open and you're so honest. And I think that's quite rare these days. It's not that easy to find. And so I appreciate how much you share about your personal life and your ups and your downs and, what makes you you.
Showing up with your full self.
I'm very open about all, and it's my hope that like other people can be like that too, I guess. Like it'd just be, I don't want to get too ahead, but I just feel like that's kind of maybe like step number one of like making the planet better is for us to all just be okay with being honest, even if like, it's like kind of ugly, you know what I mean? What do they say about the truth, right? It's like bitter at the beginning, but sweet in the end, and a lie is sweet at the beginning, but bitter in the end. And I don't know, I'm kind of all about sweet endings. So I'd rather just like lead with like, I don't like this, or I'm not feeling well. Maybe not everybody feels like that, but I certainly do.
What do you think the origin of that is? Like, how did you grow up? When did you start truth telling?
I've been truth telling since the beginning. I grew up in Florida, and I guess I went through a liar stage, but I grew up really super food insecure. Both my parents are drug addicts. My dad passed away before I could meet him. My mom is still a drug addict to this day. And I'm the oldest of four. We were all separated. We all put into foster care, kind of in and out of foster care. We're in there and then we're out, and we're in a shelter, then we're out. I guess that just created like a really very aware that I don't have anything and those people do, right? I don't really have a place to sleep, but like those people do. Like I'd go to a friend's house and see like they'd open the refrigerator and like look at all these things. It's like, oh my gosh. And then I don't have one, friends would ask to come over and I'm like, no, I would always make excuses, So I grew up very just like completely aware of all the things that I didn't have. However, it ended up being kind of like a little bit of a superpower, because when you don't have things, you also don't have direction. And when you don't have direction, you really could go up or down. So like, I learned really early how to like do things without approval, because I wasn't going to get it good or bad. I learned that if I fail a test, no one cares. And if I pass a test, no one cares, right? Nobody cares. No one cares what you're going to do. No one cares if you go to school or you don't go to school. And so it really just instilled this like, wow, if I'm going to have a different life than this, it's literally up to me. To this day, every single accolade I've ever had, my mom doesn't know. I don't, when good things happen, I don't have a parent to call. I don't have a person that I can be like, whoa, this really cool thing happened to me. So much about my life, my entire life has really just been like self-regulating, like me, and it sounds sad. Maybe it is sad, but I'm good at it. I'm well practiced in that. It's up to me to be proud of myself. No one else is going to do that for me. No one else is going to be like, that was a bad decision or a good decision, So I think that's where the honesty thing kind of comes into play. I learned really early, like, you're not going to, you don't go home to a mom, right? You don't, like, no one cares about what you did at school or didn't do at school, or if you go to college. Literally no one cares. So when everything's kind of like up to you like that, you end up just having this great relationship with like stark honesty. I was definitely ashamed. I definitely would, people would say like, what are you doing for Christmas? And I'd be like, oh yeah, I'm going to go see my family. Like, lie. Like, like there were definitely times where I just felt, I was sort of lying to protect my ego in that way. I just felt really ashamed to tell people that I didn't have a relationship with my parents, or I don't know where my parents even are, or, I don't even live at a home, it's a long answer, but I guess I've just kind of always been very starkly aware of where I was in life at any given point.
So I also have this heavy burden of truth telling in my own life and my social circles. And like hearing you talk makes me realize that I think young children learn to tell the truth out loud as a way of affirming their reality. If they don't have parents there mirroring them and saying like, hey, you're right, they learn to say it to bigger and bigger audiences, because they're like, I need my reality to make sense. And like part of that work is like having it mirrored back to you. So I can imagine like you have this ability to tell the truth to these big audiences because you had to do that to like survive as a child in some ways.
I mean, there's also a reality in which I could have just matched what I saw and been just like my mom, that's also a reality. I don't know why, but drugs were never alluring to me. In fact, I was terrified of them because of my mom. I would see my mom and be like, oh my God, I would, like I'm kind of sad, I'm kind of a sad person. And I think that's like people that is kind of blows people's minds. But I think fellow sad folks are like, yeah, I can tell. I always like a little bit of undertone of sadness to me, That's why I'm always trying to make people laugh, because if I don't laugh, then I'll cry, Like I just grew up like just so sort of faced with a lot of shit that is just like that. I don't ever want kids to have to face, seeing my mom strung out, like that's terrible. I don't want anyone to have to see that, or, her just constantly just fighting the dope sick, and then, like, nobody needs to see their mom like scratching themselves to sleep. Right. That's terrible. And I think like the honesty, like being able to tell that story kind of started when I moved to New York, because everybody here has a story. You find out really easy. Like you're not the only one. You're not the only person that has a parent they don't talk to, or New York is a big place. It's a big naked place. Every city has a wardrobe to it, or has like a soundtrack to it. New York is like, this is what it is. You get what nobody, New York doesn't try to tell you that it's great, it's beautiful, it's glossy. New York is always like, if you want to live in a very real place, then this is the place to be. And I learned when I moved here, like, oh my God, those people kind of come from a similar place as me. And like, maybe I don't need to there's nothing small town about New York. There's all kinds of people here, It feels a lot easier to sort of spiritually take your shirt off in a place that doesn't really care that you grew up in the way that you grew up. Cause like, maybe they didn't, it's,
I want to say, I think part of the reason I love you so much is because I also identify as a sad person. And I think it's very brave to be openly sad, because that is an emotion that people are so uncomfortable with. And I think it takes guts to do. But I am curious, I'm going to transition, but I would love to hear how your background informed your love of food, or where your love of food comes from. And also, I know how much you value storytelling and this amazing series you've been making with Vice, and how that plays into everything that you care about and your mission.
That was a doozy of a question, dude. So
I know. Let's start with how'd you get into food, Sophia? When did you realize you had a skill there?
Maybe never really realized that. I you know what it is? It's the thing I feel safest doing. It's definitely not the thing I feel like I am the best at or the most skilled at. There's so many people that have been cooking for far less than me that are probably more skilled than I am. But I definitely feel the most safe when it's like a thing no one can take away from me. It's like my palate. Like I have this thing, you know. I grew up super food insecure, so I think it makes perfect sense for me to grow up and eat and cook. Like I as a young person, just always kind of scrounging, trying to figure out where food's coming from and the next meal and things. I really had a great relationship with a lot of lunch ladies, particularly because there were times where at lunch, I had free lunch, they have programs at school where kids get free lunch. And it was always kind of like, oh, you're a free lunch kid, you know? People knew I was a free lunch kid, which means i.e. you're poor. But my lunch ladies were always really cool and I got lucky because there were times out there I would literally just ask, you know, I would say, Miss Harris, can I have more food? You know? And she would say no, but I would keep asking. And I think she kind of got the hint when I was really young in elementary school, like, oh shit, I think this kid literally is doesn't have dinner later. You know, this was my one meal a day. And so I sort of just became obsessed with hunger and how hungry I was and how my mom really, really struggling to have a habit, have kids, deadbeat boyfriends, feed us, feed herself. You know, food was just always this point of contention. You know, it's always fucking complicated. How am I going to feed everybody? What are we going to eat tonight? It just never felt seamless. And that, it just always stuck, you know, when you're seeing a parent having to make a decision between paying a car payment or buying groceries or, you know, oh my God, food stamps, Jesus Christ, you know, when your mom's boyfriend steals the food stamp card. And so we don't have, he uses it. So we don't have food stamps for the month, you know, the look on my mom's face, that devastation of oh my God, that was the money I was going to feed us with, and it's gone now. So that sort of became the obsession of just what it is to eat, together, the communal thing, the stress. I just always wanted to find a way to alleviate that. All the stress around mealtime. In terms of my obsession with supply chain and value chain, that's the thing that I feel like I am definitely expert in. Yeah, I guess I'm expert at making pastry, but it's really, pastry just makes me feel safe. It makes me feel fun, right? The knowledge that I have behind value chain is I can't even describe it to you. I'm obsessed with where things come from. And the first time I saw that was high school and seeing this boxes of oranges coming in from Ecuador. You know, here I am from Florida. 70% of the nation's citrus comes from this state. And we are eating oranges that's coming from Guatemala, from Ecuador. What's that about? So this is sort of my introduction into really understanding where do things come from. Then going into the culinary field where there's a regalia around an ingredient from somewhere else. These are tomatoes from Sardinia. This is olive oil from Greece, the celebratoriness of that. Before we really get globalized, as a kid, I grew up with tons of avocados. But if you ask my boyfriend, who's born and raised a New Yorker, he doesn't remember an avocado from his childhood because there weren't any, because he's born and raised in New York. And there's no such thing as an avocado tree in New York, right? So if you think back far enough, it's like, oh, wow, like, yeah, that's funny. There was no avocado toast joint in, 2001 in New York, right? Because we didn't live in a globalized place. In terms of storytelling, it's the core of everything. Every good cook will tell you that. It's an art form. Art is all storytelling, and it's not all linear. In fact, it's completely nonlinear. I think that it's not even about like the story of being a cook, but it's like the story of a dish, like Massimo Bottoro's like story of like a cake that's gone wrong ends up becoming like inspiration for a dessert that is like known for now, so I think I'm always about like trying to repurpose things. How do you take the bad day and make it something else? How do you take this really sad thing and make it a different thing? For me, it's like, I have a really sad story, but if I could find a way to make it inspirational, that's rad, right? Like maybe you only have access to frozen or canned food, but maybe we can find a way to still spin this into a meal that feels like a family can enjoy it over a holiday, like if I had to say my style, like what is my style? I'm always trying to make things fun. I'm always trying to make things bright. And I'm always trying to make things feel safe and accessible in that way. In terms of food, like, yeah, we could do like tempered chocolate and a chocolate dome, and we could just really take it to the moon, or we could just make this like this thing that feels possible for anybody to do, that is always going to transport you to a good feeling when you eat it with your family, and that again comes from my background of just like, how do we make mealtime feel not stressful, feel not unsafe, feel not intimidating, feel not possible, again, it's a long-winded question, but I feel like it's like answer, but it's a big question, for me, it's a big question.
That makes total sense. Thank you so much. Could you tell us a little bit about your James Beard Award and what that experience was like for you?
That was wild. I can't believe that. Isn't that wild? Well, I guess I won a James Beard Award you can't get nominated for. So I didn't even, when I say I was shocked, like y'all, I was like in my underwear doing laundry, found out. And I found out because of my phone started blowing up. And so Marcus Samuelson's like, congratulations, you deserve it, chef. And I'm like, what the fuck is he talking about? I deserve it? It's like, I was really excited for my friend Alexis and Joanne. So Joanne is the Korean vegan and Alexis is the Black forager. And I knew they were nominated. So so the impetus for my sort of like excitement of the day was I really wanted them to win, and I get this text message from Alexis, who is at the James Beard Awards. She's there. She's like, Sophie just won a James Beard Award. And the text is so funny because I'm like, I did? I'm Googling and I'm looking, and my partner Chris are like trying to find things. We're like, what is this? What is this? And she says it, and basically I think that the James Beard Committee has a different committee for broadcast media, and they don't really communicate with each other for like checks and balances reasons. And so the media committee didn't tell the James Beard Committee that I had won until like the very last minute. So I obviously didn't get an opportunity to go to Chicago, and I was committed. I don't even know that I could have gone anyway because I was committed, but it was maybe the single most important thing that's ever happened to me in my career. It's a shame I wasn't there. Because very Sophia fashion, though. I feel like it's like, how sad is that? I don't know that I'll ever get another James Beard Award and I wasn't there to receive it. But I also just feel like that tracks. That's like the most Sophia thing ever. And I feel like that a lot in my life. Like I feel like Sophia is the queen of almosts. I almost get there. I almost nail it. And so I get kind of sad when I think about it because that's just such a stark example of like how I feel like I'm so close, but I just never quite, I never quite get there. Never quite cross the threshold. But at the end of the day, like I still have it and I still can't believe it. And I still hardly believe I deserve it, but I have it anyway. So,
so look at it.
look at that. I definitely look at it. I can't believe it. I could have never thought that my path as a cook could have led to something like that. I still blows my mind every single day when a person can watch Counter Space and care about it. Because I had a lot of people tell me that people don't really care about food stories in that way. People want to eat it on their plate. What a way to distill a food person, just like only a plate of food. The amount of resources from the planet that go into what is on a plate, the people that grow it, the planet has to support that. The distribution. I mean, God, if there's a show, we need to see a distribution show on food. Let's just hear from the people that are just responsible for transporting it. That is its own show. They're driving trucks and planes and carts and bicycles, who knows, right? Distribution alone is so many people responsible for getting us food. And so few of their stories are told. I mean, it would just be fascinating to hear from the truck driver who has 2 kids, but he has to drive from one coast to the next coast so that we can have limes, or whatever, right? 76% of this food that we eat here comes from somewhere else. Who are those people? People that spent decades growing cacao to have never tasted a piece of finished chocolate. That's a reality. You imagine spending your whole life growing cacao to never know what a piece of actual chocolate tastes like. It's astounding. So I'm still stunned that people care about those stories, but I'm also at the same time, like, it is hopeful. I'm like, wow, people care about people, which is pretty amazing to know that.
Somewhere in between seeing that box of oranges from Guatemala in Florida to winning a James Beard Award because you're telling stories about supply chains and people and where our food comes from. Like, what are some of the big moments for you that shape you as an activist and a storyteller?
Food, like I said, it always felt like the safest thing for me. I'm a 2-time college dropout, so I always lead with that. We lead with failures so that we can find success on the other side of that. So I went to college, dropped out of college because I just couldn't pass those damn math classes, and I just needed a job. So I've told this story so many times, but there was just, this Vietnamese restaurant was hiring. I needed a job because I need to pay my bills. There was no regalia or celebration or I just want to be a cook. I need money. I need money because I don't want to be homeless, which I did end up I was homeless for a while. So I get this job. I love it. I think, wow, this is great. I could really kind of do this. The restaurant isn't even a thing anymore. It's not even open anymore. But I started working in quite a few other restaurants. I had a very toxic boyfriend who ended up leaving me with a car that was about to be repossessed and a dog. So I was in a really interesting position that I had 2 jobs, but I didn't have enough money for that last month's deposit kind of thing. So I just kind of lived in my car and I parked it in a different spot every night. I was, what do they call it? Running from repo, right? I was just running from the repo men. Then it's funny, man. I signed my lease and 2 days later that car got repossessed and I thought, wow, amazing. So that was a big moment for me. My car being repossessed 2 days after signing my first lease on my own. I thought that was pretty rad. I must have been 22 years old. And then I just worked in food for a little while. I started getting into catering, started getting into private chef stuff. And then I was like, okay, I'll go to culinary school. I went to culinary school. I dropped out because, I ended up getting a great restaurant job. And again, it's a survival thing, right? I just didn't really get an opportunity to really focus on skills in the way that I think I wish I would have, because I really just had to be a survivor. There's so many things that I really wanted to go to culinary school. I wanted to learn, but I kind of had to learn it in the job, So I moved back. I moved to Miami. I worked in Miami in a bunch of different restaurants there, did a lot of catering, and that's when I got this opportunity to be a private chef in New York. And so I had to go to New York, had to try out for a week, cook for this family who had kids. And they said, we want to hire you. And I couldn't believe it. So that was me moving to New York. So that was another big pivotal moment. It was me just becoming a New Yorker. Like, that was a really big moment. So I come to New York, and then I start doing the private chef thing. Memorial Day to Labor Day, you're in the Hamptons, you're just doing these events day in and day out. And that's really where I learned that's where I got my skills up, not from like working in a restaurant, no, being a line cook, like that was so important, but that's where I learned how to make food for a person. That's when I learned how to see that a person is eating my food. When you work at a restaurant, it's a very closed system. You're in the kitchen, you're in the back of the house, or the front of the house. You don't see people eat your food. You just know if they liked it, if they get sent back or not, if the plates are clean. But there's a really unique thing that happens when you cook for a family, right? Like, you have 4 people that you cook for every day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So you discovering palates in a new kind of interesting way. And that is my favorite thing in the world. My favorite thing in the world is to make you what you want. It's where I learned that my style is like the people's food. You work in a restaurant, the chef makes what they want. But if I work for you, if I'm your chef, I make you what you want. Like, I might hate spicy mustard, but you might love it. So I got to nail it for you. So I think that was a big pivotal moment. And for me and my style, like, wow, I really want people to find this person. I want to make them what they want. And that's really, people always say, like, what's your style? Everybody always asks you. If I say I'm a chef, the next question is, what kind of food do you make? Right? And I hate when people ask that, because I'm like, what kind of food do you want? And then they say, oh, that's funny. Because I'm like, yeah, I'll make you whatever you want. And so I did that for a long time. And then I got really bad burnout. And this was back before Instagram was like, Instagram didn't even have Instagram stories. Instagram didn't even have video yet. This was like Snapchat land. Okay. Totally different. I got burnt out. I quit all together, stopped doing food. And I had, this friend who had a friend who told me that Mike, to go to Milk Makeup because they were doing a casting. And I'm like, well, I'm not a model. I'm not going to that. And she's like, no, they're casting for like talent, for like, not for like people to talk on camera. You'd be really good at that. I was like, okay. So I go to the casting. It's packed full of gorgeous people. I was like, I'm in and out. I'm out. But some woman come up to me and she's like, I think you're on our talent list, which is not the model list. I was like, oh, the talent list. Great. So I get to the last level and I meet Georgie Gravel, who's one of the founders of Milk Makeup. And we're talking about honey and breast milk and eczema. And like, we're just chatting it up. So I was not right for that particular job, but they were going to take the company vegan. And they needed someone who was comfortable with talking on camera and doing all of those things. And I guess I wasn't really doing it that much, but at the time I had 50,000 followers on Instagram, like, which was a lot at the time. And they asked me if I could, do their social media. And I said, sure. It's funny. I'd never worked in an office before. I was 27 years old. My first day on the job, I remember Farrah Marcus. She looked at me and she goes, we're going to do a welcome email and we'll CC it to the whole office. And I looked at her dead square in the face and I said, what is CC? What does that mean? And she was like, are you kidding? And I was like, no, I don't know what that is. Because I'd only ever worked in a kitchen. I had no idea. But I learned, and that is really a pivotal moment for me because I credit that time at Milk Makeup with really learning how to like be a correspondent, my eye line, how to be comfortable talking on camera, how to, a story arc, a hook, what's a beat, what's my beat in this moment. And that's also where I really learned that I wanted to be on camera and I loved it. And I was not ashamed of it. I was not ashamed of saying that that was a thing I could do and wanted to do. And then I went freelance and I met my manager. She's amazing. Marissa Caputo. Or she met me. She saw me on the Milk Makeup Instagram. And she used to represent Xana Rossi, who is also one of the founders at Milk Makeup. And so she reached out to Xana and was like, who is this girl? And she took me out to lunch and she's like, I want to represent you. And I was like, for what? I didn't understand what she meant. And I did something wild and I signed a contract without even really understanding what I was even signing. I don't recommend it. But that was another moment. That was a big moment for me because something about this woman, I thought, oh, I like this woman a lot. And that was getting a manager. That was a really big moment. That was in 2016, 2017. And then I was a freelancer and I didn't even know what that could even mean. But basically she's like, you're a great storyteller. And then I got my first job with Club Monaco. I'll never forget it. And I had to show up and just tell my story. And I was like, okay, I could do that. Right. And my manager was like, yeah, they're going to give you a ride, like a car. And I was like, for what? And she's like, like to drive you to the thing. And I was like, I'm already here. I took the train, like I was just so like not, and I met Cindy Ramirez for the first time and Alyssa Coscarelli and Verena from Gossamer. And I'll never forget it. It was I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that they're going to pay me for that. I thought, wow. But I met so many incredible women that also had such similar stories and we kind of connected. And I guess that was another really big moment where I thought, wow, everybody's a storyteller. So it felt like a comfortable place to tell my story. And I think from there, I just kept doing that, doing events and cooking for brands. And then 2020 happened. And that was wild. My whole life that I had built doing things in person and teaching classes and everything just kind of ended. And it just became this phone world, and thought, shit, I got to pivot really quick. How are you a really great food teacher? And you tell your story, you do events, and then now it's all this, and then you compete with everybody else who's also doing it. It was tough. And my partner had lost his job and we were just at home. And then George Floyd happened and I felt so betrayed by my cell phone. I felt so betrayed by society, like we all did. We all just, got so hit over the head with this pandemic and not being able to leave the house, but wanting to stand up for things we believe in, and also the reality of standing up for what you believe in on a platform and an app that isn't safe. This place isn't safe. You stand up for what you believe in and you get death threats, and I think even now, like people who follow me have noticed my pivot. Like I don't utilize Instagram in that same way anymore because it became not safe for me, and now it's like, it's bigger platforms. It's like, you know what? Instagram is great for activism. Activism makes you aware of something, but I take my advocacy seriously in real life and off this. Advocacy is getting to know the people in need. It's not an awareness campaign as much as it's on the ground. I'm connecting with people. I'm not telling an audience of people, I need you to care about this thing. No, I'm going to the core of that thing and I'm helping these people on the ground. Right. And so that's, I think, the thing I take the most seriously, whether it's through the Women's Prison Association, whether it's through Edible Schoolyard, whether it's through Project Glimmer, whether it's through the Food and Finance School, whether it's through any of the number of things that I advocate for. So much of that for me and what activism and advocacy looks for me now is actually not here on social media. It's actually in a larger way with my show, another show that I did that comes out next year, and directly to the people in need,
I really appreciate this juxtaposition because it's something that's been coming up again and again in all of our interviews. Is like, yes, we have these new platforms that make us feel more connected with a bigger audience, but it cannot replace like day-to-day conversations and relationship building and organizing.
Never. And we kid ourselves when we think that it can. And I understand and want to be very respectful to accessibility. There are a lot of people who can't walk out and be advocates. And I get it. And I appreciate that. They can't work on legislation reform. They can't have dinner with Stacey Abrams, but I can. And if I could sit down and have dinner with Stacey Abrams, if I can go work on the campaign trail in Georgia, if I could do that, right, then I will, and we all know we need to be registered to vote. We got that. And I understand that my Instagram story might convince a few people to be registered to vote. But you know what? I'm an in-person kind of bitch, So if I can go to Atlanta and I can be there and I can help create a kit that has water in it and potentially a seat in it that I can pass out to a person who's going to have to stand in line for 7 hours just to vote, I'm going to go do that. And that's what I care about. I think social media can be incredible for that, but I also have seen it be a place where it can be you can just be brutalized. It can create access to people who weaponize language, people who mythologize you. Every single time something horrible happens, if you don't speak on it, you're a horrible person. Notwithstanding that I got my own horrible shit going on today, perhaps, perhaps I'm dealing with, a mom who was sober for a year and then just relapsed. And now I have to deal with that. And God forbid, I forgot a horrible travesty that happens. People don't speak on it, how activism is. It requires you to be consistently in a relationship with sorrow. That's my job. My job is to interview people about sad things, about injustices, about horrifying moments, about climate change, about starvation. That's my job. So maybe on Instagram today, I just want to make pie. Maybe I want to just make pie today on Instagram, and a lot of people don't understand that, but when your whole life, and you're already someone who struggles with clinical depression, you have a family. I also have to show up for an 8-year-old. I have to show up for my partner. I have to show up for you guys. I got to do my job. Right. And so my activism right now, if I had to put it into words, really looks like ground zero. My activation or my advocacy looks like right to the source. I might not be yelling about it on Instagram, but best believe the things that I'm doing for the people that need it most, those people are who get to see Soph. Those people see my care. Right now, in terms of social media, I just want to be a haven of, for 5 seconds, let's not hear about all the horrible things and let's just look at this really nice tart. That's where I'm at right now with my Instagram. And maybe in 3 months, I'll be somewhere else. But today, on this September the 26th, I think, that's where I'm at.
You're also hinting at something that I think a lot of people are dealing with today, particularly younger kids. I have a 15-year-old sister, and it's difficult to talk to her because there are so many, depressing things happening all at once. And I know you said you're interacting with an 8-year-old, and I'm so curious, what's that experience like for you?
I mean, he's chilling. His biggest concern is, dessert. But when he gets older, I'm sure it'll be different. And I think this is so antithetical to what we're fed on social media. Is you got to care about it all. If you have the energy to, I feel nail that if you can. But this is also a problem. We got that so many bad things are happening. We start to get into we start to get into the negative stew of it all. And what that does is that kind of dissuades us from solutions. We need to be having solution-based conversations, not fear, sorrow, horrifying, doom and gloom conversations. And the slippery slope that is Instagram before you know it. And then it starts to get my worst thing, the least favorite thing in the world is it starts to get cynical. Oh, we're all going to shit anyway. What's the point of even trying? From an advocacy activism standpoint, there's nothing that makes me more furious. Well, it all doesn't matter anyway. And I tell you straight to your face, if it matters to you, then it matters. Period. And this matters to me. I take the shit real personal, And so advice for a young person who is just so overwhelmed but wants to make a difference, find the one way in your life that you can make a difference every single day and do it. If it's keeping your block clean, do it. Just your street. We get ourselves so overwhelmed with this big stuff, maybe just do a bake sale, man. And you know what? Have the proceeds go to this thing that you know you are so indefinitely passionate about. Maybe it's foster care reform. Maybe it's a Roe conversation and it's abortion access. Whatever it is, and you can promise yourself that you can commit to it every single day, that's your thing. And when someone else yells at you because you're not talking about this thing or that thing, you can counter it. Why aren't you talking about the girls in Iran? Why aren't you talking about hunger in Brooklyn? Exactly, right? When there's this many issues and this many problems, we all need to be able to say, girl, you got Iran? Cool. I got global hunger. Cool. You got abortion access? Sick. You got foster care reform? You sure? Great. If you need a little help, I know a person who knows a person. Cool. Agriculture legislation? Got it. We need to be mobilizing in a way that looks like that's your pot. You got that pot. And I feel like very equipped because that's how kitchens work. That's how kitchens work. I don't walk over to a line cook and say, hey, you're not looking at this bread over here? That's not their station. That is not their station. Find the station that you can just make streamlined, efficient, beautiful. You become perfect at it. That hot apps, sick. Hot apps, we need hot apps. Hot app station at 11 Madison Park is the most terrifying thing in the world. If that's your station, I'm going to have to need you and require you to stay there and nail that. Because hot apps, they come before dessert. They come before pastry, right? And so instead of everybody feeling like they need to talk about everything, I need you to find your thing and nail it. Because it's not my thing. It can't be everything can't be my thing. And we're just yelling at each other because we're not talking about everything. No, because I'm talking about global hunger. I'm a supply chain expert. That's what I know. I can't also be the person who has to know everything about ice melting. You know, I can't, you know?
Yes. Tell me about supply chains.
Man,
tell me about global hunger. Like, give me some high points for people leaving this podcast to understand the relationship between how our food moves and who doesn't have it.
Oh my gosh. This is a show with 50 seasons. Okay, so I love this conversation so much. You know, I find it to be so fascinating that everything we want in life, the planet and a person give it to us. 2 P's, the double P's, the people on the planet, the people on this planet are the people, are the beltway for us to have it. You know, that's awesome. And we live in a globalized market, globalized economy. We know that, right? This is good and bad. It is good that we give Mexico money for all those avocados. However, right? It's like, oh, but then there's how many avocados do we want from Mexico though? And how often do we want them? Oh, you want them every day? We want avocados every day. And we want them multiples. And when I say we, I don't just mean the United States of us. I mean, everywhere wants avocados and they all want them from Mexico. This is the problem, right? And we are so out of touch with season, right? What it takes to grow. It could take 9 years for an avocado tree to become mature. You know, 7 to 9 years for a cacao tree to become mature. But what do? We complain about how much they cost. We complain about how much avocados cost. We complain about how much chocolate or coffee costs, you know, and a cup of coffee, a $6 cup, let's just say $6. How much do we think the people that actually grew the cacao actually make, you know? Because there's the planetary cost, the resources, okay? Then there's the labor, then there's distribution, transportation, land ownership. They got to get their cut too, whoever owns the land, because we know these farmers don't be owning the land that they're farming, okay? Because that's just not the way that it grows. And then we want single origin, right? So we want everything to come from the same farm, all right? We want our single origin coffee and our single origin oil, but we're mad that costs so much. right? And then there's the guy at the top that gets the most, right? Whoever that is, right? But in that company, in that entity, say it's Nestle, inside that there's all the C people, right? All the CEOs, the CMOs, and all those C-suite folks. Then there's marketing, then there's social media. All those people get a cut. So by the end of it, the deliciousness that is this thing, right? Who is responsible for that? Those C-suite people did not contribute to the flavor of your chocolate, okay? The growers, the farmers, the harvesters, the land stewards, the transportation, the distribution, those are the people that are responsible for your chocolate tasting so good and it getting to you. They make nothing. And when people find that out, they're really pissed, you know? And then they say, okay, well, now you have direct trade, right? Now forget fair trade for a second, because fair trade, what does that even mean? It's about direct trade, right? And when I think about supply chain, food is my beat. But this is the thing, this is with everything. Number one ingredient in everything is water, right? Whether you're talking about clothes, whether you're talking about cosmetics, the beauty industry is a big one, especially when we're talking about waste. Oh my God, beauty industry and waste is wild, particularly because there's so much time and energy and resources put into this stuff that you're not meant to eat, right? But a lot of the ingredients in there are things that could be edible, right? So I think what I want people to realize is that there is a person behind everything that you put in your mouth, usually multiple people. And when there's multiple people, that means there's also a place, okay? That means there's streets, that place has schools, hopefully, that place has things that you also have, right? And I don't think that we consider that. We look at these grapes. We're just like, these are just grapes. Someone took these off a vine. That someone might have kids. They might be trying to put their kids through school, right? But give me the recipe. Forget your recipe for a second. Forget the recipe. Just go out of your way to enjoy this, because so much was put into it. You know, and right now, I think the largest thing, the thing that gets to me most in America is this sort of like organic, GMO, like, what do I buy? So almonds are bad, oats are bad. Where do I start? And I think that, it's hard. It's so hard. Like, what's good for me? Before we ever get to the me thing, before we start getting human, right? I think a great place to start is to ensure that the land that we farm is taken care of properly. Is to ensure that the people that grow our food, that they're paid properly, that they are taken care of properly, right? I think that's a great place to start. Let's learn those stories. Before we start, is this bad? Is this bad? Is this bad? I can tell you one thing, the way the agriculture system is set up and who gets paid and who doesn't, that's already skewed. So of course you don't know what to eat, right? Monsanto owning everything, industry consolidation, small farms. It's almost impossible for a small farmer to exist anymore. Why is that? Who owns farmland and why is it so damn hard to acquire? Who used to own it versus who owns it now, right? These are things that I commit my whole entire life to. My hope, what makes me hopeful, right, and why I'm not doom and gloom, is because I have a place where I can tell these stories. And let me tell you, there's no person in the world that is not absolutely furious when I tell them that there are, human beings out there that have to harvest dates like the fruit, dates in the middle of the night because of climate change, right? Who have to risk their lives, may get bit by a rattlesnake, literally risk their lives so that you can eat dates so that you can complain that they're $9. You know why those dates are $9 a pound? Because somebody risked their fucking life to harvest them for you and Gwyneth Paltrow, And so that's the biggest thing. The most hopeful thing I can think of is like your food systems, the people that grow the food, they're people. And if there's anything that we should all know and feel good about as people, I'm a person, you guys are people. I'm very hopeful and believe in the goodness of people. I really do. I don't think people wake up and just say, I want to destroy things. I think what we're going to need more of is more anecdotal evidence of how things are problematic. We can't just hear things in a clinical sense anymore. climate change is going to affect the crops. And by the year 2050, no, let's meet this farmer. I need you to meet these champagne makers, these grape farmers in Champagne, France, and then look you in the eye and tell you, I have never seen fewer grapes than what we have right now because of climate change. And this is how it's going to affect the planet. This is how it's going to affect this industry in 10 years. So for me, it's just like, we need anecdotal evidence, more stories directly from the horse's mouth, from them. We need more diverse storytelling. We need, and that just doesn't mean in demographic in terms of race, that means age as well. Some of the most incredible, compelling stories for how problematic things are going to come from people who have been in an industry for a very long time. We're going to need multi-language anecdotes and evidence, because these things are not just affecting the United States. We're going to have to also start teaching people what happens. It's not enough to just go vegan, y'all. It's not enough, because those factory farming, those animals are going to die anyway. It's not enough to just change the way you eat in your home. What are you doing to protect land? Land conservation, livestock conservation. What are you doing to protect animals? It's not enough to just change how you eat. And we just start eating what, bioengineered, weird, mechanized plastic food? No. The other good news, the other thing that everybody should feel hopeful about, there's enough food to feed everybody. Plenty. Excess. So much so that 40% of the stuff we grow here in the United States goes in the trash. We have enough food. And I think that that's the most exciting thing. We have enough food to feed people. We literally do. Sans all the other stuff. It's just that we need to be combating these. We need to be, instead of getting mad at your friend because she's not a vegan, let's get mad at Nestle. Can we get mad at Kellogg's? Can we get mad at these industry consolidators that are doing things like putting toxins in our food without us knowing? You know, we're taught to trust what's in the grocery store because we come from that era of grocery stores. You know, we don't live in an agrarian society anymore. And until such time, I do think we should look to the past. I think it's one of the rare times you can say that. We can look to, these indigenous cultures that come from growing food, these native cultures that understand how to grow food. I think it's one of the few times in the world that the answers really lie backwards, pre-plastic. So when people are like, so what are we going to do about this? Somebody asked me recently, and I know I'm talking a lot, but I think this is important. Somebody said to me, how can fungi save the world? And I said, well, I want to make it really clear. Fungi, that's not really its job. You know what I mean? It wasn't like put here to like save the world. It's just part of the ecology of the planet, right? It was put here to do quite a few things. Okay, there's, depending on saprotrophic, depending on the type of relationship, there's mycelium, the most intellectual language in nature that has the most intellectual conversation within nature is mycelium, right? And then at the end of it all, though, the fungi, the purpose of that queendom is decomposition, right? Decomp, right? Breaking things down. If it's not for fungi, then we'd all just be dead stuff everywhere, right? And so when people say like, fungi is going to save the world from plastic, I'm like, we made that plastic. We created plastic, right? So who needs to save the world from it? We do. Fungi just needs to keep doing what fungi's doing, right? Like we do. Humans do. And so when it comes to food and supply chain, the best thing you can do is make yourself informed, educated, empathetic, right? Understanding, and most important, open to mobilization. Please be open, right, to mobilizing with me in whatever capacity, because I want to mobilize with people who are informed and educated and empathetic, right? And so I guess that's where my hope comes from. Like I do have positivity when it comes to food systems, because I know that I know the power in an informed, educated, empathetic group of people, led with mobilization in mind. Like we're going to do all these things and then we're going to mobilize. And the secret sauce, the fifth thing, is imagination. It's going to take an incredible amount of imagination to create systems revolutionary enough to exist on a planet that is changing so rapidly. And when I hear imagination, I think something we've never seen before, right? Something we've never heard of, which to me looks like a group of informed, educated, right? Empathetic people. I never seen that before. I never seen that. Willing to mobilize. We're willing to inform ourselves, educate ourselves, be empathetic and understanding, and come together in the end. Like, wow, that is the most revolutionary shit I've ever heard of. And this is why when I say the internet doesn't feel safe, because it doesn't feel like a place where we're all informed, or we're all educated, or we're all empathetic, or we're all ready to mobilize. In fact, the internet feels like a place where there's tons of misinformation, where there's tons of miseducation, where there's tons of no empathy, where there's tons of no understanding, and therefore absolutely no mobilization, which is why I think it's so crucial to find in your outside of this, please find a people or a person or a community or something in real life. Because when you look someone in the eyes and you sit down with them, there's some magical shit that happens. You guys learn shit together. You are empathetic together. You hold my hand and I hold yours, right? And it's like the left and the right hand, man. I'm telling you, I have a left and a right hand. You have a left and a right hand. And let me see. They're different, but they fit. You know, they fit. We can mobilize with both of our different hands. And so I always want people to feel hope. And I guess that it makes me sad because social media used to be a place where I felt really, really hopeful. And now it's a place that I have to just sort of pivot right now and just make a place that just feels like fun or feels honest, because it doesn't feel all of those 5 things. And I think those 5 things are the revolutionary things that we need to save the world.
You're amazing, Sophia.
I just 20 minutes. I'm sorry. It all felt.
No, you're great. We're out of time. So you said all the smart things in the right amount of time. I think it was a perfect way to end. And we sort of began where we started with radical honesty and candor, and all that feels really important.
Yeah, we did. It's a lot. I don't want to ever, make perfect the enemy of good. I know that those 5 things that I'm asking for are like a lot. They sound simple, but they're a lot. But I feel like 3 out of 5. We could.
Yeah, the kindness part not being left out no matter what, you know?
But empathy, like always, empathy number 1, Like even if you don't want to mobilize with me, and even if you don't want to like inform yourself, if we can just be like empathetic, educated, and just do that, then I think that we can kind of save anything. Save everything.
The Hero's Journey is brought to you by the Center for Food Safety. Production by Julia Ranney and Ashley Lukens. Editing and social media by Amanda Lillibridge, Duration, and Annalisa Camacho. Theme song by Walker Lukens and Adam Mason, and audio engineering by Adam Mason. You can find us across all podcast platforms and follow us at Center for Food Safety on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook, and CFS True Food on Twitter. We're on the web at theheroesjourneypodcast.com. Do you have a hero you'd like to see on the podcast? Fill out the form in the show notes or email us at theheroesjourneypod@gmail.com. If you enjoyed this podcast, like and subscribe, and make sure you'll never miss an episode. We'll see you in a few weeks.